Hi, I'm Chris with Afflicted Broadheads, and today we're going to talk about what turkeys eat and everything about their anatomy from the neck up. Stay tuned. Okay, let's get started. This is going to be exciting stuff. What we have is a harvested bird here that's been breasted out and put on a cooler for a day. Later on, we're going to go ahead and breast out the thighs and the legs and anything else that we miss, so we make sure we get everything out of this bird. But for now, we've already done a little bit of the cut down, and we're going to get into some of the details of turkey anatomy, form, and function from the neck up. So as we start and we look at the turkey, we see that the head is quite fragile, but it is specialized for everything that they need to do. We have these big eye sockets here because their vision is so good. We have these great big ear openings on the side of the turkey and a very complex area there for their auditory canal and all of the organs associated with hearing. So there's lots of room for that. And even though their brain is small, it's specialized to capitalize on all of their senses. Now, when we look at the beak here, it's quite large, it's tough. It's a formidable weapon for them. They can use this beak, of course, to dispatch a snake or a frog or a mouse or anything else that they can fit down their throat because they're omnivores. They will eat anything. They do, of course, pick a lot of small seeds and little things off the ground, so the beak is able to do that. It's also specialized for preening and keeping their feathers in A1 shape. But let's get a little deeper into some of this anatomy here. So, as we look at our cutaway here that we've started, and we remove this skin off the top, we expose the beak, which is open here, and then I have detached the tongue and this whole area away from this lower part of the beak. And when we look at that, it's really easy for us to see these different structures here. So we have these taste buds and this tip of the tongue from here forward. Now, turkeys don't have a specialized sense of taste. In fact, they have between 50 and 500 taste buds. We have 10,000. So if that gives you a little bit of comparison, that's where they are at. Now, they can taste salty, sweet, and bitter. Whether or not that gives them a preferred food source has never really been determined. When food is put out, turkeys seem to associate with whatever they like best, eat it first, and then go back and eat everything else. So we really don't think that there's any correlation drastically between taste and what they are going to eat. As we come back here and we're looking at other structures, we see that we have these papilla here. And you can see there's some at the back of the tongue, and there's some all the way back here behind the glottis. This is the glottis here, this is the opening for the trachea. And this allows them to control how much air is coming out of their mouth. And behind here, this whole thing right here, this is actually the esophagus. And I'm going to show you something really interesting about that in a minute. So let's get back to the papilla. So why are these little hair-like structures here all pointing down the throat? Well, that's the case if they are whatever they're eating, whether it's a bunch of slippery seeds or a slippery nightcrawler, it doesn't come back out the mouth. So those actually act as little fingers to keep everything in the mouth and directed down to the esophagus so it can get to the gizzard. So that's what those structures are for. The glottis here, as we talk about this structure can open and close and move back and forth. It can close completely up depending on how they want to control air movement through their mouth. The sound of the turkey, when we look at this structure here, is the larynx. And on a turkey's larynx, or all other birds for that matter, that is not what produces sound. In humans, it does. We have a voice box, it's called a larynx. That's where our sound is produced, that's where our vocal cords are. For the turkey, their vocal cords are actually all the way down here in their chest. And we're going to be talking about that in another video, so make sure you subscribe because you're not going to want to miss that. I'll have blood all over my hands. It'll be a really cool video, and you'll see some neat anatomy. So as we look at this whole tongue structure here, we can see that it is very specialized, that everything has a purpose here to direct traffic and airflow, traffic meaning food. Now, one of the most interesting things is when you look at this turkey and you see the size of this esophagus, okay? I have a big thumb, and my thumb easily fits into that esophagus with lots of room to spare. When that means that, a lot of times people think, well, a turkey's not going to take down a whole acorn or a whole hickory nut. They absolutely do, and they absolutely will. Now, they get that down, it will go into their crop. The crop I'll show you here in another video can hold a pound of food, and that is stage 1 of digestion. Once it gets into the crop, the breakdown starts. That's not where all the fun stuff happens. That, of course, is in the gizzard, and that's in another video too. So as we look at this coming down, you can see that if the turkey can fit it in their mouth here, they can get it down their throat and they are going to eat it. So this whole part of the turkey is just amazing. I mean, you're talking about an omnivore that has learned to survive off the tiniest seeds. They'll strip, a blade of grass that has tiny seeds on it, and then they'll eat things up to acorns and hickory nuts, and of course, living prey, like even a mouse or a snake. So very specialized, very adaptable to live anywhere, and really interesting to be able to see this up close, how this all is formed and functioned. So keeping in mind that the turkey can eat just about anything that it wants, the next stop on the journey after the mouth is the crop. Now, the crop sits forward of the breast, and it is basically just a large pouch. And this is the pouch on this gobbler here, and you can see that it's empty. There's nothing in it. So the esophagus comes down and it drops into this crop. Now, a lot of times, this crop can hold a pound or more of food. So pre-season to breeding, you would see that the gobbler is going to be feeding like crazy because he is building up this layer of fat that sits in front of the crop, and this is called breast sponge. But actually, it is just the fat that the gobbler is going to utilize through the breeding season because he's going to do a little bit less eating and it'll be a lot more concentrating on finding his gal. Now, it doesn't mean that they won't eat. They certainly do. But if they're really focused, they will utilize this breast sponge and ignore eating. One of the things that's amazing about the crop is it is a tell-all for the hunter to the first place that your turkey is feeding. So if you get a crop full of food, it is really easy to determine exactly where they've been and exactly what this turkey's favorite food is. So depending on where you're hunting, the turkeys are going to be after a different food source. There's going to be something they prefer, whether that's a farmer's harvested field from the fall, whether that's a green field that after rain, you'll see the turkeys there, not only because they have a good line of sight and they can dry off, but also because there's going to be lots of good food out. The bugs will be there, the worms will be up if it rained really hard, so it offers them a really good food source. If you're in deep wooded areas, maybe there's a creek basin, you can look in these crops and you may find little odd tubers and stuff where they're really digging along the creek banks, getting the first exposed items there that offer them high nutrition. And you can then examine this crop on a bird, and if you're going to hunt that area again, you will know exactly where they're going in the morning to feed. And that can be very helpful. So if you're looking through here and you see that it is completely full of grasshoppers, well then you know that they're making their way to a field and they're feasting on these grasshoppers, and they're going to continue that program normally, unless something screws them up or bumps them out or there's some danger that screwed up the program. They're normally going to continue on that plan time after time until that food source runs out and they change to something else. So I always make it a point to examine this crop, and normally, like I said, there'll be a lot more food in here to be able to disseminate. We find some neat stuff in the crop and also in the gizzard, which is the next stop on this journey that we're going to talk about. Pre-digestion starts here in the crop. So there's enzymes in here that start to break things down, starts to soften things up, but there's no grinding action or heavy digestive action here. From the crop, you can see the crop here tapers down into the rest of the esophagus, and that goes directly to the gizzard. So let's talk a lot about the gizzard because I love it. The gizzard, besides being delicious, is often called the gastric ventricular mill, and it's called that because it is a mill. It literally grinds things like you would think of grinding wheat between two stones. So when you put a bunch of wheat seeds in a mill and those surfaces are going like this, that same action is happening inside a turkey's gizzard. And in order for them to complete that digestive process, they have to eat stones. They have to have some grit in there. And that uses, between the gastric mill, if you will, and those stones, that is the action that is needed to break down the seeds and maybe even the heavy nut shells and other items that they have eaten. Now, a lot of people, when they take the gizzard out of their turkey, will collect the stones, which are also referred to as gastroliths. Here's a collection of some of the stones that I've gotten over the years. I think it's really interesting. You know, there's every kind of stone you can imagine. Sometimes there's polished lucky stones and just sandstone and other small rocks, but it's really neat. They will continually grind these stones down to sand and pass them through. That's why they have to continuously eat more grit and more stones to be able to have that in their gizzard. So you want to also, as a hunter, be conscious of where are my turkeys finding their grit. If you're in an area that there is no real exposed dirt, there's maybe not a creek, maybe not anything but a gas road, you want to look at those places maybe along the well where there's a bunch of exposed rock. Where are the turkey going? Often in top of hills and stuff where there's been some logging or maybe some well drilling, things like that. You have a wellhead there. There's a good place for grit and also a good place for dusting. They kind of go hand in hand sometimes. So you want to be, you know, be looking for those sort of things. But if you're in an area where grit is hard to find, finding that source could help you pattern your turkeys. So as we move out of the crop, the esophagus goes straight down. It goes behind the heart. It goes all the way down between the liver, and it ends up down here at the very bottom. And if we clean this off, we can see that we have this gizzard right here, this great big muscle, if you will. It's very tough. We're going to pull this gizzard out here so we can talk about it a little more in depth. So again, the gizzard is at the very base, and a gizzard has basically two tubes going in, okay? It has the esophagus going in, and then coming out starts the intestines. Now it's anchored in here pretty good, but when you're looking at this gizzard, you can just see right out of the gate how muscular it is. The whole thing is just, it's a tough little deal, and its whole job in life is to grind up whatever the turkey eats, get all the nutrition out of it, and send it down its way. Now, of course, most of the nutrients are absorbed in the intestines. This is just doing the work to get it there so those nutrients can be absorbed. So if you take it, and all you have to do is just cut lengthwise through it. You can open it up, and you can expose everything that is in that gizzard. And as you open it up a little wider here, you'll be able to instantly see that it is full of digested, broke down leaves. There's pieces of nuts, and of course you can see all that grit that's in there as well. So what I typically do is I empty that into another container to be able to wash that grit out and put it in my jar with all my other grit. This is also the step that you have to do if you're going to eat your gizzard, so you might as well save the stones while you're at it. So you can see there's not a whole lot here. A bunch of rocks, some different colors. You can see that it has already broke down almost everything in here. If there was bug legs or anything big, that would be evident when you were looking at this. You can see here, here's a white, this is a pin oak acorn right here. Sometimes you'll see a lot bigger acorns. Here's a crushed up piece of pin oak acorn. So even the turkeys, just like your whitetails, are utilizing your acorns, and in the spring, if there's leftovers, that's a good chance you're gonna find your turkeys there. So don't discount that. Now, as we look at the gizzard after we've cleaned it out, you can see that we have this lining right here, and that is called the colon lining. If you're going to eat your gizzard, you're going to want to remove that, and if you just get your fingers in here behind it like this, you can just tear that out and remove it, and that gets rid of that lining, so you don't have to worry about trying to chew that, and you can go ahead and cook up your gizzard however you like, and it'll be a lot tastier once you've removed this, I promise you. But as you look at this, you can see what an awesome little piece of machinery this is for the turkey to be able to grind and take care of everything that they eat. So After the gizzard, of course, we go through the intestines, the nutrients are absorbed, things are continuously broke down, and we're ending up with fecal material. So what's the big deal about fecal material in turkeys? Well, it is a great way for you to look at turkey droppings and tell, am I looking at a gobbler dropping or am I looking at a hen dropping? So what we like to say is hens lay honey buns. When you see a plop of turkey dropping and it looks like a honey bun, it's round, it's got a little pyramid on top, 99% of the time that's going to be a hen. When you look at a dropping and it is in the shape of a J, you can almost always assume that that is going to be a gobbler of some sort, whether a jake or a mature bird. They will leave a J dropping. Now, what's the reason for that? Well, that reason is really interesting, actually. So hens are specially developed to be able to hold their fecal material a little bit longer, which makes it softer, and the way it's released, their sphincter at that end is a little bit differently designed than the gobbler. And the reason that's important is because the hen needs the ability to hold their fecal material for a long period of time, because when they are nesting, they are going to leave that nest for a brief period of time to maybe feed, but to go to the bathroom, they walk a long way, and they need to be able to hold that, plop it down. That way predators are not finding those eggs. So that's why the difference in the anatomy, that's part of the difference in the droppings, and that's why you can easily disseminate between hen poop and gobbler poop. So it's just another interesting tidbit there. So that kind of in a nutshell wraps up our turkey digestive system from beak to butt, and I hope there's something in there that's beneficial for you as a hunter. Please feel free to ask any questions below. We'd love to talk more in depth with you about turkeys. Please subscribe. A lot of great content coming up. Give us a thumbs up. We appreciate you watching. Thanks.